This is the Creative Market Free Goods Roundup the week of August 17th, 2015. As usual, there are 6 different free goods this week, but they are free this week only. So if when you're watching this video, you see something you like, just check out the description of this video where I'll place links to each one of these 6 different free items. So first up here is iconic camping logo badges. These badges are provided in both Illustrator, EPS, as well as Photoshop file formats. So I have the EPS versions to open up inside Illustrator here, and I have the versions that have the type expanded or outlined, but they do have versions that have the fonts fully live and editable. So if you want to change around all the words on this, which I'm assuming you'll want to, just pick one of the versions that doesn't say expanded in the title. I picked the expanded ones so I didn't have to download all the different fonts here so they'd still look good, but you can go in here and change these different words to say whatever it is you want it to say. And there are 2 different versions. There's this version, which is the darker version, and then there is also this version, which is a lighter version to be used on a dark background. So I'm just going to show these on this particular version since it stands out really nicely, but you can feel free to switch between the light or the dark version as you see fit. So right here, I'm going to zoom in on the first one. A lot of these have a very nice and clean style to them. The illustration style is pretty simple, but it's also fairly effective at what it's trying to convey here. And there's a nice selection of different layouts to pick from here as well. So you can either use these as like layout examples or layout starting points if you don't want to use these illustrations, or you could just pull the illustrations themselves and use them on something else entirely. It's totally up to you how you want to use these. You could of course just swap out illustrations, like if you don't want to use this knife, you could ungroup this, select this knife, and perhaps move over this tent to where the knife is if that's something you want to do. You can really mix and match all these however you see fit to make them kind of work best for you. And right here we have a little Airstream style camper. Some of these I might just move out the line work just a little bit to make it a little bit clearer to see if you're kind of zoomed out a little bit further, but that's really up to you how you want these to look. I always like playing around with stuff just a little bit after I pick it up to kind of customize it to look exactly how I'd want it to look, but I also think that all these should work pretty well just as they're shown. But that's really it for a basic overview of what you can expect here. Once again, I'll quickly show the lighter version since these also stand out very nicely, and I think these work very nice on a light background as well. So I'm going to quickly scroll through these once again on these lighter versions so you can see how these look. But as you can tell, between either a dark background or a light background, you should be pretty covered with picking one of these 2 different versions, as either version looks really nice on the appropriate background. But that's it for this pack. You can either use these as pre-built and just kind of use them as they are and change around the type, or just pull illustrations or basic layouts from them and kind of see how you can get the most flexibility out of this pack. So if you liked what you saw thus far and you think you might have some use for this in the future, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. Next up is seamless folded paper texture. This pack is actually super cool because it's something really different as far as texture packs go, and it's origami folded paper. So there's 4 different fold patterns, and then each one of those 4 different fold patterns has 3 different colors to pick from. There's this version that's a natural brown or kind of cardboard almost color. There's a black version as well as a white version. So I'm going to show each one of the 4 different layouts in a different color so you can kind of see different colors as well as the different folding layouts. And as far as the size of these goes, they are, if I go to image and image size, 3600 by 3600 pixels. So they're plenty big for pretty much anything on the web and a lot of different print applications as well. And also, if I didn't mention it before, these are provided in JPEG file format. So this is the first folding pattern on a natural paper color that's kind of like a brown color. If I zoom into 100% here, you can get a good idea of how this texture looks up close. These look pretty sharp, but also it has a very stylized look to it me, so I actually quite like how these look when you're zoomed in pretty close. It's not like a super high contrast real paper look, but it's not super cartoony either. It's kind of living somewhere in the middle of those 2. So here's the second paper folding pattern, which is a much tighter pattern, and this is on the black version. So this is a kind of interesting, very high contrast look. I'll just zoom into 100% here so you can get a good idea of how these folds look up close. Once again, I think this is just a really interesting idea to show off texture or perhaps create overlays from texture if you want to give your work a pretty unique appearance to it. I can't think of seeing an origami style texture pack before, so this is kind of an interesting departure from what I typically see. So here's the third paper folding texture, and this one has some really neat, almost abstract lines to it as far as the pattern is a little bit more indistinguishable from the previous 2. It's an interesting take on the origami look, and I'll just zoom in a little bit closer on this one as well so you can get a good idea of how this looks up close. And the white versions in particular, like this one, will be very useful to overlay on your different objects. So if you were to take one of the white textures and place it over a different look, I'm just going to very quickly create a colored solid layer below this so I can kind of show you how you can quickly make this overlay very easily. So below the texture, I created this blue solid fill layer, and then the texture layer is on top of it. To make it very quickly and easily blend, you can just change the blending mode from normal to something like multiply, and as you can see, it overlays on the color, and you instantly have an overlay over a custom color of your choice. And the same would apply to images or stuff like that. Just set the blend mode to multiply, but you can certainly try all the different blending modes and kind of see what you think looks best. Some of them will look much better than others, but it's certainly there for you to go in and experiment with. So here's the last one, the 4th pattern, and this pattern is probably my favorite to the bunch because it has a pretty cool look to it. almost a star-like pattern being created here. And we're back to the original natural color of paper here. I'll go zoom in close on this one to finish it up, and as you can see right here, where there's some really cool textures inside this one. So that's what really makes this one my favorite of the bunch, although I think they're all really cool in their own way. They have really interesting and separate looks to them all, so I'll just very quickly scroll through all 4 of these once again. Oops, we'll probably want to change this to normal so you can actually see it. And here was the second one, and this was the first one once again. I actually really like how clean this first one is as a pattern. It's a little bit more subdued than some of the other ones, so if you want something a little bit lighter and just to kind of add a little bit to your work, then the first one might be a pretty solid bet for you. But once again, this is a super cool pack. I really like the idea of an origami paper folded texture pack, because this is just something, like I said before, quite a bit different than what I've seen in the past. So this is something I really enjoyed seeing. So if you enjoyed this as much as I did and you think you'll have some use for it, just be sure to grab it this week. Next we have Blackflower, which is a font. This font is provided in both OpenType, TrueType, as well as web font formats, so I have the OpenType version opened up inside Adobe Illustrator here to show it. And as you can see, it includes both lowercase as well as uppercase letters, so I'm going to zoom in on the lowercase letters first, so you can see how these look. These have a brush or handmade look to them, but it's also much more stylized than a highly realistic version. The upside to that more stylized look means that these should be pretty legible as being a hand-drawn or distressed looking font, even when it's used a little bit smaller, although I'd really recommend using this particular font as a headline font, given that it'll probably show off the features a little bit better. So here are the uppercase versions. They obviously work very nicely with the lowercase versions as shown above. Everything looks very consistent across the 2 different sets, so these look like they're a family, which is always a pretty nice plus. When you're working with the font, you want all the letters to work nice and well together. And below that we have all the numbers 1 through 0, as well as a handful of special characters. And just to show all the different special characters here, I'm going to go to type and then glyphs near the top, so you can kind of check out everything that's inside. As you can see, there's quite a few different glyphs included in this particular one, including stuff like yen symbol or the euro sign or pound sign. And then below that we have a bunch of different accented letters for different Latin-based languages. So if you're speaking a non-English language, these will come in particularly handy to you. And then there's a few different special items below that, so definitely check out the glyphs on this font, which is type and then glyphs once again, when you're using it if you're looking for something special. So at the bottom here I typed up free goods roundup, so you can see this looks actually typed up and used in a sentence. I think the stock kerning is actually really solid on this, and the stock spacing isn't too much like some fonts tend to have it. I think this is a pretty solid overall look for this. This works really nicely together, and all the spacing looks really nice together. There are some inconsistencies with the spacing, but given that this is a very handmade looking font, stuff like that doesn't bother me like it would if it was a very rigid sans serif font or something like that. I think this just tends to add to look a little bit more. But that's it for this font. If you like this font, you think you'll have use for it either now or in the future, just be sure to pick it up this week. Next up is Shelby, one-page HTML5 template. This is a simple portfolio theme, and it's built on HTML and CSS, and it doesn't use a CMS like WordPress, so if you want something that you can just kind of get done and move up right away to a server, this is a really straightforward way to do that. And up at the top here we have a drop-down menu that when you click it, it actually takes up the entire page right here. So if you want to click on one of these, it'll just bring you to that particular section of the website. And this website is also fully responsive, so it should look good no matter what kind of device you are looking at it on. But like I said before, this one's pretty straightforward, so I'm just going to zoom down to the bottom here and kind of show you what's included. Up at the top here we have a Who Am I section where you can kind of explain yourself or write a biography. And there's also a download button for your resume. If you don't want that on there, you can just take out that code and you should be good to go. Below that we have a My Work section that kind of lets you know what size you should be sizing your work. So this is 600 by 600 pixels, and it seems to have a little bit of a zoom in effect as you hover over it. So that's kind of a neat little bonus here. When you click on this, it actually doesn't link you off anywhere at all, but I'm sure you could change that to link off to whatever page you want it to link off to if you want to create separate pages for all of your different pieces, which I'd probably suggest doing if you do this, just so you can have a little bit bigger images for people to check out. And below that we have a Say Hello or Contact section. So there we have stuff like address, phone, as well as email. And below that we have a bunch of different social icons. The very bottom of the footer just has a copyright and then a your name and then a return to top button. That just shoots you back up to the top of the page here. But like I said before, this is a pretty darn straightforward portfolio theme, nice, simple, and to the point. So if you're looking for a basic HTML, CSS portfolio theme to kind of build on and use, this is a pretty solid starting point. This should be very easy to customize, and they also took the time to kind of let you know what the image sizes should be. So when you change out all these images to be the correct size, you won't have to guess what that size should be. But that's it for this theme. If you liked what you saw, just be sure to grab it this week while it's still free. Next up is Retropress Illustrator Text Effects. This is a collection of 3 different retro-inspired text effects for Adobe Illustrator, so you are going to need Adobe Illustrator to use this. And also on the side here, there are some different basic banners to use that'll go nicely with these different text effects, so you can kind of check these out and see if that'll be useful for you as well. So there's 3 separate looks here. There's this one on the top, then this one below it, and below that we have the final one. And they also have these little type elements above them if you want to use that. If not, you can just select them and then delete them. And the way that they built this is that these letters are a bunch of different layers of type all stacked on top of each other. I'll say that in general, general, it's probably better to do that all in the appearance window, but they did this one by stacking all the type. So if you want to change what these say, selecting the type tool, for example, and just changing the top layer, you'll find that you need to go to all the layers below it and change all those as well. So it won't be a very efficient way of doing things. But if you want to do this in the most efficient way possible, you just want to go to Edit, and then you want to go to Find and Replace. And from that, you're going to want to set your find to the word Retropress, which will change all instances of the word Retropress across this entire document. And then under Replace With, you want to type the word that you want to replace the word Retropress with. So in this case, I wrote potato because why not? So what you want to do is just hit Find, and then you want to go to Replace All after it's found the word Retropress. And once you do that, it'll make all the changes. There should be 20, and then you should be good to go. Except on this top one, for whatever reason, this stroke right here that has a dotted line was outlined, at least on my version. I don't know if that'll happen to everyone else, but this one didn't automatically update, so I'm just going to delete that so it doesn't end up looking bad on the top of this word. But as you can see here, it went ahead and replaced the word Retropress with potato very easily, so that's really the best way you can go in here and do that. And also make sure you download all the fonts before you do this. There's a text file with links to all these fonts, and they are all free fonts, so you can go ahead and get those first. So I'm just going to zoom in on the bottom one here and then work my way up so you can kind of see how these look. And also, as you can tell, they include these backgrounds. So if you want to use those backgrounds, you can certainly use just those or use them in combination with these words, whatever you think will work best for you. So here's the first one right here where we have our word stroked, and then below it there is a shadow as well as a striped shadow with a bit of an offset to it. So it gives it that nice vintage or retro look. And I'll zoom up to the second one here, and this one has a halftone dot pattern behind it. And then we also have the letters with a little bit of a 3D drop shadow on it. And this is the first one up at the top here. Once again, we have a 3D extruded shadow behind it, and then a little bit of an offsetted color right behind the main top layer. Something to note with these, if you use these on a professional project, the 3D extrudes have a little bit of a jaggy edge if you zoom in pretty darn close. So before I send these off to someone to check out or look at or get reviewed, I would probably just take a line and then draw a solid line behind this to make this really nice and smooth. Most people probably never notice that, but it's always worth taking the time just to make sure that looks really good when you're zoomed in super close. But as you can tell, when you're zoomed out about this far, you can't even notice that at all. So if you're using this on like a web application, something like that, you won't have to go and do that extra step because the end user would probably never see it. But a pretty cool pack of 3 different retro-inspired type styles for Adobe Illustrator here. And once again, off to the side here, we have these banners to use if you want to go ahead and use those as well. And on top of that, we have the backgrounds that you can pull and use on their own. There's these little textured elements behind it. They must be locked in the layer. But if I were to turn this off, you can see that there's a layer above it with this actual texture on it. So those are pretty cool as well. And you could, of course, just take this background back on here, select it, and then change the color to be something else. If you want to make it a custom color for whatever reason, it's pretty easy to go in there and do that. But that's it for this pack. If you liked what you saw, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. And next up is Resume/CV Elliot. This resume template's provided in 2 different base formats, and that's A4 as well as US letter sizes. So I have the A4 versions opened up here inside Photoshop, and it does include a ton of different file formats as well, including InDesign, Word, PDF, as well as Photoshop. But I have it opened in Photoshop just because I didn't want to download all the font files, and they all appear correctly here. But if you're doing this for professional reasons, I'd really recommend perhaps InDesign, as that's probably the most flexible of all the offered tools as far as layout goes. And as you can tell right here in the layers, at least in the Photoshop version, they're all very nicely grouped with header, then the personal information right here, and then the letter itself on its own little folder with the type inside of it. So this is very cleanly organized and very easy to see where everything is. And it's also worth noting that you can change all this type. I'm not going to do that since I didn't download the appropriate fonts, but it is super easy to go in there and do that once you do. So just keep that in mind when we're working on these. And as you can tell here, there's 2 different files. There's this one, which is the cover letter, and then there's this one right here, which is the actual resume. So I'll quickly go over the cover letter first. It has a simple 2-column layout that I think is pretty effective at breaking up the information here. On this little left column, it gives the date as well as who you're addressing this to, and below that your name, address, and all the contact information. And then on the right side, we have the actual content of the cover letter itself, where you can write down everything that you need to tell that company or person at that company. At the very top here, there's a spot for your name as well as profession or job title. And at the bottom here, we just have some contact information once again. So here is the actual resume portion. And once again, it's a 2-column layout, very similar to one before it, except this time up here is just your name, a ton of room for social links, and also included in this file are social link vector files. So if you want to pop those in here, you can certainly do that as well. There's a spot for professional statement if you want to kind of give a brief overview of what you do or what you want to do for that company or person. And up the top here, we have experience in a nice and simple layout. Below that, we have education, and then skills below that with little sliding graphs that you can use to let them know how experienced you are in different either personal skills or professional skills, programs, stuff like that. And you can of course change all the headings of these if you want to. It doesn't have to say professional and personal, for example. This could say like programs instead of personal. It's really up to you. Below that we have references. I don't tend to send references unless I'm specifically asked to when applying to a job, but this is here to use if you want to do that. If you don't want to use that, you can just go to the folder that says references and toggle a little eyeball icon right here to turn that off. And then maybe you could slide some stuff down or add some additional experience or just longer descriptions to that experience up here if you want to kind of fill this out a little bit. But that's really it for this template. Remember, there are different formats, including the InDesign, Word, and then PDF if you want to use one of those instead. So nice and clean layout for a resume. And of course, you can customize these as much as you want, change the fonts around, change the colors here to really make this a bit more personal to you. But this is a pretty good starting point for a resume as the information is presented very cleanly, and it should make it pretty quick for whoever's looking at it to ascertain the information that they're looking for. So if you think you'll have use for either the resume or the cover letter, or perhaps both, just be sure to pick this pack up this week while it's still free. So that's it for this week's free goods, and do remember they are free this week only. So if you saw something that you thought might be useful, just check out the description of this video and you'll find a link to download it there. And as always, if you like this video, please like and favorite, and if you want to see this video every week, please subscribe. This video is released every Monday to let you know it's free this week on Creative Market. Thank you for watching.